As to why you feel that the Warren Commission might be deceiving the American public by publishing this volume?
The Warren Commission is attempting to deceive the American people. There's no question in my mind.
Why?
The report, if you compare this one-volume report, which is purportedly a summation of the 26 volumes of evidence and testimony, you see that every major conclusion that the Commission reached is wrong, is in error, with the exception of one. They were correct in saying that Ruby killed Oswald, but if that hadn't taken place, if that didn't take place on television, I don't know what their conclusion is.
I don't think everybody could read the 26 volumes, and I think they condensed it to edit it, but condensed it so that it was readable and you could get a concise opinion.
Oh, I have no objection to their editing. I just wish they did it in a frank and
I don't think it
truthful
was
fashion.
editing. I think it was just condensing, not to pull in or put things that they thought were going to make them look good.
Well, they themselves used the word edit, didn't they?
That's their word, yes.
There was one thing on the wound of entrance. You said that the Dr. Perry saw, he said, was a wound of entrance, the one that was at his neck. Isn't it true that he never saw the wound in his back, he never turned him over? And then he ripped this open to make an incision. So when he first saw it, he thought it was an entrance wound. Had he turned him around and saw the other one, he said he would have seen that it was a wound of exit.
Well, that's not precisely so. Let's review the facts. The doctors at the Parkland Hospital held a press conference on November 22nd after the president's death was announced. Incidentally, in our film, we wanted to present the stock footage of that press conference, but that has disappeared. It was seized by the Secret Service on behalf of the Commission. The Commission never printed a transcript of it, and it's just gone. Nobody that I know knows where that is. But we do know what the newspapers reported at that press conference. It's impossible to seize every copy of the New York Times, of course, and other newspapers. They reported that every doctor who spoke at that press conference, who gave an opinion as to the nature of the wound in the president's throat, said it was an entrance wound. One of the doctors said, let me finish. It's true they didn't turn him over, they said later.
That's the key.
Oh, I think not.
That's the key.
Well, if you
they would have seen that this was a clean cut.
Well, you think there was a wound at the top of the neck, right?
At the back.
Yeah.
At the back.
Except Dr. Humes, sir, who performed the autopsy, who took the pictures and the x-rays, who was the government's expert on the autopsy, never saw that wound in the back of the neck, which you make reference to, because on the chart...
So well, let me ask the question, Mr. Costanza, do you suppose that if a person is psychotic or has such a warped urge that a law or a gun that he might use is registered or not registered would prevent such a killing?
No, it won't, but you can then trace it. It'd be an easy way to trace it. If a man was fingerprinted when he bought the weapon, let's say just a simple rifle, and the rifle, let's say, was found, or some way they were able to trace it to where he bought it, how he bought it. I mean, today anybody can buy a rifle. I mean, you don't have to have any, just sign your name and you
Well, I think the problem always has been the fact that honest people don't mind admitting they own guns. The hoodlums are going to get guns in any event, under any conditions, and it's not going to prevent it. Gangsters will always find weapons.
Right.
I can see some good, I suppose, in a gun registration law. However, I have one bad feeling in the matter, and that is that here again is something else we're doing that is being handled by the federal government.
But some things are necessary, and this is something that is necessary. Some things the government belongs in, and I
what
think
is the advantage, may I ask you?
Well, I think gangsters don't buy rifles. They get 38s or they get 45s, and they can get them through the underworld. We can't control, but we can control kids buying rifles. We can't, like you said, psychotics. We can't trace it down to them. I'm speaking specifically of rifles where you can go to on a charge account, like Mr. Whitmore did, and simply just pick up a rifle. I think this is wrong. I think it's bad.
You own a rifle?
No, I don't.
You own a sidearm?
Yes, I do.
Is it registered?
Yes, it is.
With the local police?
Yes, it is.
Do you have a permit to carry it?
No, I don't.
Do you have it with you?
No, I don't.
Search that man. I'm sorry, Mr. Costanza. I truly see that there may be some advantages in it. I don't believe that the psychotics are going to be stopped by a registration law. I think where the children are concerned, it is up to the parent. And again, I value my own personal freedom and the lack of government control on the individual more than I do the registration law that you are speaking of.
Well, I don't think it's taking away your freedom just to have you register for
There is not, Mr. Costanza, a federal agency that requires fingerprints that doesn't have mine now.
Oh. That's your Oh, we can get it again with the rifle.
Let them take a photograph of my present fingerprints. They can interchange them, agency to agency.
I think it's a good idea. I think it should be.
All right, I think it is too, and you better leave that gun at home.
I'll do that.
Thank you. Next, please. Where is the lady? There was a lady here earlier.
My name is Mr. George.
What was that, George? Probably, yes.
My name is Mr. Johnson.
Yes,
And I'd like to know what you think of legalizing off-track betting.
I think it's fine.
Do you think that the public would go for legalizing off-track betting?
Oh, yeah. Would you in here, how many of you would like off-track betting?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any others?
Brian Wonders open.
Civilians have been killed in U.S. bombing raids in the Hanoi area. In the ad, it will happen again. Sources said today that
Open side.
Now I'm going to take a moment out to tell you about Jim, Mike, and Lou. Who are Jim, Mike, and Lou? Well, these are the three young guys who own Park Shell Service over at the corner of Belmont Avenue and Wyandanch Boulevard. Not only are they three nice guys who have a little business that they're running for themselves to support their families, but they are, like most of us, guys who are interested in making their business move and grow. In order to do that, they realize that they've got to take really good care of their customers. Now, when you drive into Park Shell Service and you go to get some gas, automatically your oil is checked, automatically the water is checked. They take a look at the battery, make sure that the battery is, up to the level it should be. And, of course, barring the fact that it may be in the rain or anything else, get your windshield clean and everything else. Good service is the key to Park Shell Service. So speaking about good service, their winterizing special is the best service you can get. You get 2 gallons of Shell antifreeze, a lube job. You get your oil changed and the oil filter changed also. Good afternoon, open line.
Mr. Davis.
Yes, sir.
I was just thinking, I think people make one mistake with this Negro problem, attempting to lump all Negroes together.
That's true.
Let's say somebody living in a $20,000 area or a $35,000 area, and if a Negro did live next door to them, how would they have the audacity to say that they don't want these people to live next door without even knowing them beforehand?
Well, this is the ridiculousness of the situation. People who, middle-income people who have made a good investment in their home, put down a good down payment, pay a mortgage, pay taxes, do all the things that just about everybody does in order to be a homeowner. I don't know where they get the assumption that if the family skin is black, they can get a house any easier than the people who are already in the neighborhood. It means the Negro family that would want to move into this neighborhood, not because they're blockbusting, but because they want to live in a nice neighborhood,
Right.
has to apply for a mortgage, have to buy the house, they have to come up with the down payment, they have to apply for the mortgage, their credit has to be checked out in the terms of things that they've made payments on before. They have to have a credit reputation, they have to prove financial stability, and the ability to pay for that house the way anybody else does.
Right. Let's assume that the Negro buying that home next door does turn out to be a sour apple, right?
Yeah, but if
that sour apple was an Italian,
Yeah,
or if it was a Polak.
Yeah.
A sour apple is a sour apple. You just have to accept it as that rather than lump all of them together.
You see, this is part of the whole mistaken concept of the thing that I've never been able to grasp.
You take people taking the word, the black power. I think most people knew what black power meant. It meant simply political power. It meant simply wanting to get up on an equal level.
Oh, sir, it was fairly obvious to me. I don't know who else it was obvious to.
And I think most people, what they don't like, which they won't accept, is that if a Negro does look them in the eye and say, I'm as good as you. And I think this might hurt too many people who may say that they say, well, they're all right, that I'll accept them as equal, but in that one instance, I don't think they will.
Well, it's a funny thing. Mankind, human beings, and part of the thing that we should be trying to continually fight is our egos. We, human beings, are egomaniacs. And throughout history, it doesn't make any difference whether it was color, religion, ethnic background, or whether it's the color of the eyes or hair, blondes against brunettes. It seems a base inherent factor in man that he's got to have somebody to degrade.
Right, that's right. That southern cracker farmer down there knows no matter how stupid he is, there's somebody that's going to be...
Somebody he can stomp on, right.
That's right, he's got somebody there. I think people accepting this make a sad mistake.
This is a thing that was... By the way, I didn't mean to bring it up, but it was brought up, and it was brought up very, very well. Last week, in one of the movies on television, I believe it was Thursday night, they had a prize-winning play on called A Raisin in the Sun, which goes through this particular process, takes you into a Chicago ghetto, and through an insurance policy and explain the background. These people get $10,000 of the death of the father of the young man and want to use part of that money to buy a house out of the ghetto. And it gives an example of this. These are people who, all three of them, the mother and the son and the daughter-in-law, they all worked for a living. They were no less stable, no less hard-working, sober people than anybody else. And the inability or the things they ran into in trying to buy a house, not in a white neighborhood, but in any neighborhood where they could buy a decent house, which just so happened to be the white neighborhoods. It just seems to me that there's a mythology connected with this too.
I think socialization is private, personal things. Who you want
to socialize is your own. Hey, listen, let me tell you something about that.
Infringe upon the rights of other people. When you legislate, like has been done down south, where these people have to request their civil rights, they have as much civil rights as Americans. Who passed the law that we can have our civil rights?
I've been living in my present location for 2 years. I rent a house. I know by a nodding, speaking acquaintance to about 6 people out of my block. I don't think, except maybe once a year individually, do I ever gather with them socially. I say hello and goodbye to them as I walk past them, and how are you? In the summertime, if they're in the front yard and we're in the front yard, we'll stand around for a few minutes and talk. But we really do not, we don't travel in the same social circles because we have different interests. But there's nothing in the block that says you have to,
If you have a private club that says, let's say it's a Italian American club or a Polish American club, and you've restricted it to that. But when you open a store, or when you have an apartment house, or you have anything that's a public facility, where can you come up and say, well, no, I'm restricting you to let's say, none, or just whites?
Yeah.
Or, break it down to just Polak. It's break it down to, it just doesn't work.
It's a funny part about this, too, and this is one of the criminal, unfortunate aspects of this segregation situation involving who lives where. That in many of the ghettos in New York, the Harlem areas, and in many of the Chicago ghettos, the Negro family or the Puerto Rican family that lives there is actually paying as much rent or as you would pay for a nice small house somewhere because of these tenement bosses and these tenement lords as they would be if they were allowed to live in a nice neighborhood.
It's unfortunate. Too many people just don't believe that. They think that might be...
Yeah, the guy's getting it for like $40 a month. I know it was brought out one time that a Negro family with 4 children, a mother, a father, and 4 children, were living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Harlem where there was a bedroom, a kitchen, a living room, and a bath, and we're paying $135 a month.
Yeah.
Do you know what you can buy for $135 a month in the way of an apartment?
And they And the crux of it that these people are so disheartened. They've been knocked down so long. I mean, this goes way back when their fathers came over and their fathers' fathers and fathers' fathers who have been castrated, I don't like to use that word, but this is what it is. They've been smashed down so far down and told that they're no good, and the chance out that they'll never be able to get that. This generation I was trying to get out of that.
That's right. That's what they're trying to do.
Lost hope. And this is the reason that, I mean, there's a symptom for the drinking. There's a symptom for the drugs, right?
There
is.
Well, I believe there is. And I think it's just come to the point, too, where this generation, as you talk about it, either feels you're going to either open the door for us or we're going to break it down.
That's right. You see, the thing is, it costs money to have things like Head Start. But it also costs money to have things like prison.
Yeah.
You have a choice to be the one or the other. I think on the one aspect, we can lay out this extra money and do some good and help these people out.
Okay, sir, listen, I have to move along. It was nice talking to you. Bye-bye now. All right, let's...
This is Johnny Carson. If you're in uniform, bored, lonely, and a long way from home...
Homes by the chimney with care, all visions of sugar plums. And
we return to right of the service is no longer authorized by the Department of Defense. And I understand there's another show, the other show, here and I, but that some of the callers had stated
all visions of...
Yes, sir.
I was just wondering, what you feel about 1964 when the country overwhelmingly rejected Goldwater, that the reason was that they didn't want the war to be escalated? I mean, doesn't it sound fair that the reason Mr. Johnson really got a landslide was because they thought he would maybe set some kind of peaceful policy or maybe try to get a coalition government or something?
Well, sir,
Vietnam?
Yeah, let me make a statement that I made probably a year ago. And again, my position has not changed on this, too. That after the 1964 elections, considering, and in no demeaning way to Mr. Goldwater, the overwhelming victory that Lyndon Johnson had, he had the mandate at that time to do anything he pleased,
right,
because the people were behind him.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes, Johnson, rather. And I think perhaps he had one of the greatest opportunities that every American president had. He could have been the hero of the 60s by settling the situation.
I think he had a mandate to slow this war down, or maybe to stop it. What do you feel is his reason for continuing his policy for this? Is he trying to go down in history as a tough president? Is he trying to go down in history?
I don't think as much that. I don't think...
Has he painted himself into a corner now that he can't get out without saving his own face? In 1964, there was no congressional investigation made of it before the election. There was peace proposals made. That died out so fast, not even Congress attempted to investigate it to find out just what the story was.
Sir, at the risk...
Get a proposal. Get a proposal.
You're asking a question, you don't give me a chance to answer it. I was going to say, at the risk of sticking my neck way out, and I mean way out, and again, it's a more or less of a political or an economic opinion if you want. I believe that the administration did what they did in order to give the economy of this country a shot, which apparently it sorely needed at that time. Also, I would venture to say, and this is not a publicized fact, that, and I don't necessarily attribute it to perhaps Mr. Johnson as an individual, but the government, the administration as a large group. In other words, the buck stops at the top, it's true, but there are a lot of decisions made and a lot of influences made from many, many sources. There are a number of civilian construction companies over in Vietnam now cleaning up. And I don't mean cleaning up the country, I mean cleaning up dollars and cents wise. They are paying laborers who are willing to go to Vietnam, to Blacktop and so forth, $12,500 to $14,000 a year.
You remember that story you once said where we were paying, I think you said it, where we were paying
3 American oil companies.
Right, we were bribing the Viet Cong not to invade those lines?
That's right.
Wasn't you that said that?
That's right.
Isn't this a great reflection on us? we, the United States, that we have to keep our economy up and slaughter 18-year-old or 19-year-old boys. This to me is really...
Well, let me put it this way, sir. Thank you, Gordy. All right. Gordy Baker's behind me. He just dropped his teeth. We are not unique in this, by the way, sir.
I thought maybe we were a unique country. I think we were up until 1964. I think Mr. Johnson, with his background of Baker and Jenkins, I don't think he could have ever won unless he came out with a policy so opposed to Mr. Goldwater. You know, I'm saying his background of a man being associated, his two closest advisors really were sour apples, Mr. Baker and Mr. Jenkins. I don't think any other president would have won with those two people, with those two things hanging on his neck. But yet people wanted him because they were against Goldwater's ideas. Here, this man.
Well, I don't know that more people voted against Goldwater than voted for Johnson.
I think
this is again a theory that has been brought forth a number of times.
Right, but getting back to the peace proposals that Congress didn't even attempt to investigate, and now we had Mr. Javits say that we are fighting the bulk of the war. You know, that we're fighting, that the Viet Cong is fighting holding action. This isn't even being investigated with Congress. What's wrong with Congress? We get reports that we are losing down the drain. I think it was $50 million a day being stolen from us, the American people.
Well,
people are working on welfare out here.
The Nassau Congressman, this Nassau Congressman, Lester Wolf, who just returned from Vietnam, intends, he says, upon the convening of the 90th Congress to attempt to open an investigation into the handling of military supplies that are filtering through to the black market.
Right. I think he's a pretty small man. I don't think he could do it. It'd take a bigger man.
Well, he's not a freshman. He's not a freshman congressman anymore, and it depends. Of course, it depends on what House assignments he's on, what committees.
Doesn't it hurt you the things that we are accepting? We are accepting things like 150 people getting killed by an aircraft, and everybody just looking at it like a piece of writing in a newspaper. We're accepting losses of $50 million a day. We're taking these things for granted now. Isn't there something wrong with us? Isn't there something wrong with the average person not getting this man to stop, slow down, get a coalition government? I think we can get peace there. I just don't understand what this man's particular policy is. I think he's the guy that's heading this or holding the reins of this whole thing for some reason.
Well, I will say this. Again, this is perhaps a prediction, and maybe somebody will. Maybe I can write a book like what's her name did down in Washington. But I do have a prediction. Again, I'll stick my neck a little bit out. I would venture to say that prior to 1968, when Johnson will rerun, the administration will have to offer some foreseeable conclusion to this to the American people, or he's in trouble.
But if they do, and if he does in 1968 simply to win an election, I have to call the man the biggest hypocrite in history. Really, he did it in '64, and
As a matter of fact, just to interrupt you for a second. To interrupt you for a second, it was Barry Goldwater who made the statement on a television interview that if Lyndon Johnson had to get reelected, he could stop the war in 10 days.
No, that's really wonderful. I think
that statement came from Mr. Senator Barry Goldwater.
I knocked Goldwater from the beginning, but at least the man had the honesty of his convictions. He said what he thought. Here we voted for a guy who we thought was going to do what he said, and turned around to do the exact.
Well, I never lost my respect for Barry Goldwater.
They say that the press doesn't give us, the president has information that we don't have. Other than real military secrets, I think that's blunt. We know exactly what the administration's policies are, other than real military secrets. I mean, there are reporters, there are big commentators who certainly lay things out. They see things clearly, and they give their opinion, which is usually true. Their opinions are usually not based on flimsy accounts.
No, they base their
right. So the story
reports on
about
fact.
that the president knows, things that we don't know. I think if he does know something, if there is something that we don't know, let us know so we could say maybe this thing is justified. Maybe this just the reports of the casualties coming over. I think we have killed probably more people now than there are in Vietnam because of the casualties. They kill 80 of us, we kill 800 of them. I think if somebody sat down and added up the total, I think we found that we might have killed the whole population with the reports of the Army coming out. This credibility gap that's coming out from the Army, and there's no doubt in my mind that the President has set the tone for this. We don't know who to believe.
Yeah. Sir, forgive me, I have to move along. Nice talking to you, Bob. Say, listen right now, because I've got some refreshing news for you from Wyandanch Beer and Soda Distributors.
To Alfreda, the Jorgensen in New Hyde Park, Long Island, right here in Big Town, USA, can identify this song. Seconds, Mrs. Jorgensen.
Package of...
Seconds, Mr. Jones.
What did the state of Europe cannot feed his own people in time of peace?
Think now for 15 seconds.
Was more or less of saying, well, I still got the big club, but I'll stop beating you over the head.
It's a matter of punching you. I'll stop punching you if you want to talk. Otherwise, I'm going to keep punching you. I'm trying to deal with somebody and pinning him against the wall. I just wondering what you thought about his knocking down the fallacy of the domino theory and saying that he didn't think that, well, this thing with the Asian, that the United States being in Asia, or should be in Asia, or that that area was a threat to our security. When he took the three proposals and felt they were fallacies, what do you think of that?
Well, the so-called domino theory that evolved in the 50s has been proven many, many times, both economically and militarily, not a true factor anyhow. You can take that completely out of the picture.
Right, so now we take the second and we say it's a threat to our security. That area that China will get too big and powerful. I don't think that one specific area is worth that much to our security. I don't think that.
Not personal security. I will say this.
Even a long-range program. Let's see if we can maybe find a valid reason for being there. This is what I, try to get to.
The advantage to the communist regimes in Southeast Asia involving Vietnam is that rice bowl. They are, no question about it, in their own country because of weather conditions, because of crop failures, and at times it can happen to anybody, do have a food problem. This rice bowl, but as a matter of fact, right now, where this Mekong Delta, where we have just sent troops in this Iron Triangle, is the rice bowl, which can do an awful lot to the economic structure of the communist countries in that area. Tremendous amounts of rice.
I just wonder if I could just get a little more specific.
Yeah.
The rice bowl is important to the Vietnamese, right? Not to the Chinese. I certainly don't think that rice bowl is going to feed China or it's going to make a big dent in their economic operations, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm asking.
Well, there's enough.
Is it that big?
Here's my understanding that this rice bowl, in other words, that the area of Vietnam that grows rice as a food, because of their weather conditions where they are consistently favorable situations, they have very little famine situations there, can produce enough rice to supply most of Southeast Asia with their 80% of their needs.
Is that right?
This is what I understand, yes. And this is one of the problems. No, taking into consideration, following it the way I have, what Ho Chi Minh has to say, what the statements that come from North Vietnamese press through Hong Kong and through Japan, taking into consideration statements made by our own press, by Johnson, McNamara, Rusk, and so forth, I think, frankly, we have reached an impasse here in the fact that both countries, neither one now, or both of them realize that there are no overwhelming military victories possible. I think now we are in a basis of pride on both sides. Neither side wants to be the one that gives in first.
I'm just wondering, in Korea we had an army overrunning another nation, right? Mm-hmm. Black and white. Here we have no line. Have there fighting South Vietnamese rebels and giving them a name of Viet Cong or whatever it may be?
Well,
really South Viet.
Well, sir, all the term Viet Cong means is communist Vietnamese.
Yes.
In other words, in translation, this is all it means.
They are South Vietnamese.
Well, it's oddly enough, there is no such thing as North Vietnamese people or South Vietnamese people, just as the same, just as the same as...
It was the basis for the United States saying that the North is trying to take over the South. Have we gotten any, not divisions, battalions, companies? Have we captured any companies?
Not en masse. Not en masse.
Of the North Vietnamese?
Yes, not en masse. They have captured North Vietnamese regulars dressed in North Vietnamese... I don't know. I really don't know.
I think it seems to me, we are not coming out smelling too well.
Yeah, I'd like to point something out, if I may, that may be an interesting factor in regard to that it relates to Vietnam and other areas. Since the problems of the world have evolved out of World War II, and this is one of the problems I think that the United Nations, unfortunately, though they have made many, many attempts, have not resolved in a satisfactory manner. It seems every time there is an internal problem within the boundaries of an ethnic group, and I say ethnic group in the sense that there are people where an established boundary is there, and the problem seems to stem, we have, I don't know whether it's our fault or the Russians' fault or the UN's fault, every time there is an internal problem within the boundaries of an ethnic group, and I say ethnic group in the sense that there are people where an established boundary is there, and the problem seems to stem, we have, I don't know whether it's our fault or the Russians' fault or the UN's fault, but they look for the solution in dividing the country into a north and south. There is not one country that has been done where this has been a satisfactory conclusion.
This is not perfect. We know that. But it is the only solution other than fighting the way they're doing now, right? We know it's not perfect. It's not perfect in South Vietnam. It's not perfect any place we have split anything. But isn't it better than what's going on now?
Well, no, what I'm saying, sir, is this, that whether it's Vietnam, Middle East, whether it's Korea, if it happens to be in areas of Africa where they're doing the same thing, the dividing of a country does not solve anything. If there's an internal problem, the internal problem has to be worked out within the country as a unit. Surprisingly enough, we lived 100 years after his time, but in our own country, Abraham Lincoln recognized this.
Yeah. But it's the better of two evils. I think it's unfortunate, and I never thought I'd say it about an American president, but I think the man is acting as a tyrant in this one area. I see no basis for him attempting to continue this thing. He talked in his State of the Union message where it was another 2-3 years. Yeah. A long-range, hard deal, and the amount of money that had to be expanded into 20 or 30 billions of dollars. I don't understand it. If we're thinking, let's say, I would say $25 billion into this effort, right?
Something like that, yeah.
I don't think the whole economy, the whole gross national product of China is near that. China, I'm saying.
Well, there's another factor, too, that's very, very disturbing. Now, this thing has gone, the escalation portions of it have gone now for 3 years. Johnson in his speech is talking about anywhere from 2 more years, possibly up. If we do have or recognize a threat, a military or political threat from what we call, in a bloc or in a group, the communists, it would seem to me that the effort, material and economic and military efforts being put out by our side, in other words, with what is it now, 400,000 American troops plus the amount of economic material that's going in there. On the other hand, or on the other side, what the opposition is mostly Viet Cong plus a certain limited number of North Vietnamese divisions that are scattered out through there. We do not see any Red Chinese soldiers in there. We do not see any Russian soldiers in there. And it would seem to me that their manpower is not being utilized or worn down or worn out, if you will, in relation to ours. Now, this I find disturbing.
This is the point I was trying to make about out to $20 billion, and it'll probably be $25 billion. Now, I'm saying I don't think the whole gross national product of China is that much. Now, captured, stolen. That we are actually fighting against our own.
Yeah, there was a story that broke a couple of months ago where they had stolen 500 limpet mines.
I would say to the extent of 25%. That's they are getting out material in some way, whether it's being stolen or whether it's being sold, or in some way they are getting 25%.
Yeah.
I referred to this $20 million because the Newsday had an article saying that we were acting in restraint, and I think it seems to me if you tell a lie big enough and long enough, people will believe it. To say that we having 500,000 men there spending $20 to $25 billion is acting with restraint, that is kind of stretching it a little bit.
Sir, forgive me, I must go. I'm running into my news and I have a couple of spots to do. Bye-bye now. Nice talking to you. All right, let's get a couple of messages out of the way. Here on Long Island, we're used to and look forward to the pleasant, relaxed suburban living. Glory partying in Amityville.